When you look at the whole diagnostic, there's a total of 148 different things we think about as we want to evaluate thoroughly, soup to nuts, from beginning to end, how a product management organization functions. But it kind of breaks down into three things: people, process, and tools.
Welcome to Productside Stories, the podcast where we reveal the very real and raw lessons learned from product leaders and thinkers all over the world. I'm your host, Rina Alexin, CEO of Productside. Let's dive into today's episode. Today, we will be discussing Productside's diagnostic report, and I have here with me Roger Snyder, the chief developer of the diagnostic report, joining us today. Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into product management?
Sure. Thanks, Rina. Yeah, so I had been with Productside for almost 8 years. I've been in the product management profession for over 20 years. And in leadership roles as well as a senior product manager. I got into this. I have a degree in software engineering, and I got into this actually when I was in project management. And our small company asked that I take over product management, which at the time I barely knew what it was. But once I really got into it, I knew I had found my passion. I was super excited with this role and have been excited over these 20 plus years to be helping others pursue product management, gaining their knowledge in the area, and really grow in the discipline. And I've loved being able to do that as a part of Productside as well.
Yeah, Roger. So for many people don't know, but you were the person who trained me on product management when I first started here at Productside. And it's just so clear to me, just the passion that you have for the craft, for the practice, and the value that you deliver to each and every one of your students and clients. And that is why I think when we decided to open up what was the optimization program, which is how we went and assessed our clients before, we decided to open it up and create a more structured approach to do the diagnosis. It's obvious why we went with you to help us create more structure around it. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about the context of the diagnostic report? Why do we start there with our transformation projects?
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about what an optimization is, right? Our clients, our companies come to us wanting to improve product management at their organization. And they often don't know what they need to do next. They know that there are problems, and they see some of those, and they help us by sharing what those problems are, their current situation, the challenges they're facing. But what we need to do in an optimization to get to the ability to help them improve, we first have to understand the problem. So we've got to understand what's going on at that organization. And what we do then in an optimization is we enter the discovery phase. And in that discovery phase, we conduct a diagnosis. And we've been doing these for a number of years. But what we wanted to do, and I like you said, I kind of led up the effort, but I consulted with a number of our other consultants on the team and took the best practices across the whole team of our group so that we could really stir all those together and create a consistent diagnostic tool that we could use to thoroughly evaluate how is a company doing and in their product management discipline, as well as in the supporting functions around product management. Because product management can only do so well on its own. It also has to rely so fundamentally on sales, on marketing, on the finance team, on the development team. So all of those relationships have to be working well, and we have to be able to help each other make amazing products. So what we do is we now actually take a look at this through the lens of what we call our product side blueprint. And the blueprint allows us to look at the context of what's going on in the product management environment, both inside the company, like things like company culture, processes, and also outside the company. What is the competitive landscape? What's the market situation? What are customer needs? That's the context aspects. We then move into the early aspects of moving through the categories of the blueprint with things like discovery. Let's go out and take a look at the processes they use to first understand a market. Then we look at the ability to define a product. What are we doing in define to actually write down everything, but also test our understanding, make sure we really do have a solid understanding of the problem space. And then we start talking about what's the solution hypothesis? How do we go about creating a solution? Then we get into create and finally deliver, right? So in each of those different categories of our blueprint, we further double click in our diagnostic report and come up with a set of 22 categories that we evaluate. Things like how aligned are internal values with what the company is trying to accomplish? How healthy is the product organization structure? We look at the effective stakeholder relationships as well. We take a look at things like governance and oversight. So all of those are some of the things we do just in the context category. And like I said, there are 22 different dimensions that we look at. When you look at the whole diagnostic, there's a total of 148 different things we think about as we want to evaluate thoroughly, soup to nuts, from beginning to end, how a product management organization functions. But it kind of breaks down into three things: people, process, and tools.
When I looked at what we were doing before with the optimization, and again, we've been doing this for so many years. It's not that we're launching a brand new product, it's a new iteration of a
Right.
practice that we've had. It's been so powerful for us because when I look at engagements that had the most outsized returns on working with us in upleveling their product teams, they all had this diagnosis and assessment in common. And that's because getting a clear understanding of where the problems lie significantly increases the investment or the ROI of the investment of training your people to change their behavior. And that is
Absolutely.
why I think our assessment is so detailed and
Mm-hmm.
follows a process
Right.
to
Agreed. It's also a system, right? So you can try to like improve the skills of product managers. Maybe you find that they aren't very good at competitive analysis, but if you don't have a consistent process for how you take the results of that competitive analysis, feed it into your requirements process, feed it into your understanding of problems, and then how you develop a solution, then it all falls apart. You could improve that skill, but if you haven't improved the overall process as well and fixed some of the other problems you've encountered or relationships that you might have with your marketing department, for example, then it doesn't make as much of an impact. You have to be able to fix the whole system.
Exactly. And we saw that proven out in our benchmark report, which we've released again this year, where it just showed that there are dramatically more higher increases in skill level of product managers and product leaders where they have both process and training. You really need to think about both. So
Absolutely.
now going into the creation of the diagnostic, I love that you already walked us through the blueprint. But can you help bring our audience along on why did we go so in depth into the blueprint? Let's start with context. What are we trying to find out when we are assessing a team's context?
So this one is actually probably the most robust. I was looking last night at the report and the distribution of all of our questions. The most questions we have are in that category, in context, because it is so vitally important to understand your problem space, to understand also your market situation, your customers' needs, but also understand the culture and values inside your organization. If your company values being able to, track everything, you got to make sure you're tracking the right things. So are you tracking how often you get a release done? Like that's an output, instead of how effective that new product release has been in either improving customer satisfaction or increasing sales. Are you looking at outcomes? So those are some of the examples of the things we dig deeper in. Those cultural values, those ways that the organization operates are foundational to whether or not you can have a great product management team. If the product management team is humming, knows how to do its own work, but everything else around it is not supportive, it's still going to lead to a subpar outcome of having great products being released. So you've got to establish this context. And there's like, I think there's actually 49 different dimensions that we look at when we're looking at that context aspect. Really, really important.
Yeah, and that really makes sense to me because, as you mentioned, we do work with a lot of different clients, but many of them actually know that there is some problem going on. Of course, they don't know it to the level that we share with them once we do the diagnosis, but we're the partner that they bring on because something is going wrong in their organization, and oftentimes it's questioning of the value of product management from other leaders in other departments. And we need to know what context is the product management team operating in, because just like you said, if the culture is not there, we need to shine a light on what
Mhm.
is the culture today and what does it need to have a truly empowered product management team.
Right.
So, have you experienced that with any of your clients? So, what kinds of issues do you often find in the context scenario, and
Mhm.
what recommendations have you given?
Well, one of the most common things we see are that product managers rarely have a good set of well written down roles and responsibilities.
Mhm.
So that challenge means that, the next thing we often see is product managers spending more time putting out fires than they are actually running a strategic business, right? That is the challenge that we often face. And, product managers, they want to be helpful. They love to be helpful. They often are the folks that know the most about their product. So it's kind of natural that people are going to come to them first with questions. And out of that helpful nature, they want to answer those questions. But the challenge is that if they do that all the time, then they don't have the time to do their strategic work, to understand the problem space, understand what customers' needs are, and then work with their development team to come up with clever and intuitive or new innovative ways to solve those problems. So by writing down the roles and responsibilities for product management, it helps product managers focus, but it also helps all the other players around product management understand the positions they play on the team, who they should be asking for what kind of information, when they should involve product management and when they shouldn't. It really just gets it clear and transparent to everyone how they all should play together as a team. And yet, like you said, I often find, okay, show me your job description, show me your roles and responsibilities. And then when I interview folks, show me what you're actually doing day to day. If
Mhm.
they A, have it written down, then B, it's not actually matching. That's the second problem,
Yeah.
right? So we've got to get back to a written set of roles and responsibilities that everyone agrees to and that helps everyone else play their position and opens up the product manager's ability to actually then focus on the strategy they need to work on and work with the right folks to make this happen. This whole enterprise of creating a product.
Yeah, I'm smiling right now, but I really am not inside because I want to say 10 out of 10 times we find that roles and responsibilities is a challenge. And that creates all these ripple effects across the organization that create unempowered product management teams,
Right.
right? You can't say no to things if you
Right.
don't know what you're supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to prioritize. And
Mhm.
product is so many things. There's so many stakeholders to keep in the loop.
Right.
Your job responsibilities will be more than 24 hours a day if you don't define what you prioritize. And so, yes, that is absolutely critical for any organization for them to run smoothly. Okay, so let's go into the next phase. Uh, Maybe share a little bit about what are you trying to discover in the discovery phase?
Right. So in investigate, the next phase, right, we're looking at how well do product managers deeply understand their customers? How well do they become good representatives of the voice of the customer? We often say product managers should be the voice of the customer, but the only way they can do that is if they have the time and the tools and the access that they need to get at understanding their customers. So they need to be getting out of the office. They need to be spending time actually with their customers using their products. Whether it's a consumer product or an internal product, B2B or B2C, can you get a day in the life of understanding your customers? So we investigate during this investigate phase, how well do product managers have what we call deep customer empathy? Are they
Mhm.
able to conduct interviews? Do they have access to market research? Do they conduct surveys? Do they do focus groups? Do they run beta tests? Are they able to do all of these things to gather that valuable understanding of the marketplace, the competitive landscape, and the customer needs? Then do they take all of that and actually stay focused on the problem? Oftentimes, and myself included, right? I used to be a software engineer. We jump to the solution space way too quickly. So the next part of this phase that we investigate is how well do they stay focused on the problem? Really
Mhm.
deeply, deeply understand the problem and get that understanding before we get to the next part, which is fun, right? How do we create solutions? That's always more exciting. But the better solutions come out of having a deep understanding of what the problems are. So we look at that. And then, like I said earlier, we make sure they have a comprehensive market understanding that includes understanding the competitive landscape. So spending time with product marketing, spending time with sales, spending time with marketing, as well as with customers to completely get that big picture view of what is the entire context out there and how well do you have a handle on it? And ultimately, can you then communicate to the rest of the organization, here are the problems we need to solve. Here's how our competitors solve them. How can we do better? That then sets the table for the next exciting conversations.
Got it. And Roger, you said at the beginning of this conversation that there is often a difference between the job description of a product manager and what they're actually doing day to day.
Mm.
And I think you would agree with me that talking to customers is probably on every single job description out there for product managers. Uh, what do you think? What is the ideal percentage of time that a product manager should be spending with their customers? And I know it can range, but roughly. And then
Mhm.
what do you actually find at organizations?
Wow. Yeah, so it varies wildly. But as you might expect, most product managers are not spending nearly enough time with their customers.
Mhm.
And oftentimes it does depend on what phase of your product's life cycle you're in. Are you in an early phase, and not even just a new product, but for an existing product that you're about to do the next revision on? Are you consciously going back and checking your assumptions for what's really going to be the next most valuable thing to develop for an existing product? Or are you spending time with a new product, really getting out there and deeply understanding that? I want product managers to be in touch with real customers every month. Now, if it's a whole new product, then you should be doing that every day, right? I mean, that's the depth of what you should be doing. For an existing product that's been out there for a while, it's not going to be as frequent, but don't lose that habit of understanding your customers. So I say, even for an existing product, you should be getting fresh customer input. And it can be through surveys. It doesn't always have to be an interview or an on-site thing. And of course, with Zoom these days, we have the ability to go out and talk to people anywhere in the world, anytime, just from the window that we're talking through on our computer screen. So there's no excuse for not being able to be in touch with your customers at least monthly, and it through multiple dimensions, right? Quantitative and qualitative. Get that juice of completely understanding your customers and keep it going all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a good point that depending on the phase or the type of product and the phase you are in, you might be talking to customers more or less frequently. But I have found, and it's kind of shocking sometimes when we talk to product managers and we ask them the question, "When was the last time you spoke to an actual customer?"
Right.
And they can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really the problem here. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're in the discover define phase of the blueprint. What are we trying to figure out here?
So now, hopefully, we've established a really deep and rich context of understanding of what the problems are our customers are facing right now. And so now what we need to do is come up with a theory or a hypothesis of what would help them solve that problem, right? And it's not always problem solving either. For some customers, it's also delight. How do I put a smile on their face? How do I make them happier in their lives, right? But whatever that circumstance is, whatever it is you want to do next to make your customers happier, you need to come up with an idea and what we call a hypothesis for a solution. So the next thing we look at is, how do product managers develop a hypothesis and experiment? And this is another gap, Rina, that we see a lot. People jump into the solution space, and within even maybe sometimes days, they think they've got it. They've got the solution, and they're going to go start working with the development team to build it. And this is where we, like I said, often see there's no moment of pause to reflect of like, did I really come up with the best idea? And how would I go test that idea is either the best idea and it's actually solving the problem the customers care about. So now we really need to test our ideas. We think we understand the problem. We think we have a solution. Now let's go and actually put some simple, cheap, quick way of testing it in front of
Mhm.
customers. Can I do an explainer video? Can I just do a PowerPoint set of slides? Can I do a mock-up using just a drawing tool? Can I get an idea out there in front of them and get feedback? So that is another area of gap that we often see in this phase.
Yeah, and I like to say with any business, you need to have a really good value proposition. You need to understand how that business makes money. You need to do that efficiently. You need to make profit, and you also need to be a learning organization. So
Yeah.
having a learning model is paramount. And in your innovation team, which product people are a part of, uh,
Mhm.
it's 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 table stakes. You need to know how to experiment so that you can learn.
Right.
And we do find that people do sometimes skip this step and they don't validate. And what are some of the pitfalls of not spending enough time defining how do you experiment cheaply?
Everything. Time, money, wasted resources, all of those challenges. If we even draw a chart in one of our classes, right? One of those diagrams that show if you do a little tiny experiment and it fails, it only costs you hundreds or thousands of dollars. But if you wait until you're actually in the beta phase of a fully built product and test, now we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million of mistake. So you'd much rather make the mistakes early on because no one's perfect. And we like the concept of fail fast. So let's test in small increments early on and get all of those different ideas out there in front of customers, trying it out in their hands or on their screens, whatever it might be. And if we can do that, we will save you a ton of time and energy and money and get you to the right product a whole bunch faster.
Thank you, Roger. I will say from my seat as a CEO, and I think this is any business leader, they want to know not just how you're making decisions, but how are you de-risking those decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
experimentation is really about risk management. It's nobody really knows. I mean, we live in a world of uncertainty. We have ideas, they are hypotheses, they are not tangible until you have some proof points.
Right.
And experimentation is about gathering those proof points. But also,
Mm-hmm.
very, very important to note that a lot of people fall into the trap of confirmation bias. So when
Right.
you are creating experiments, do not fall in love with, do not have the answer in your head. In fact, I always recommend try to prove yourself wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Be your
One
own
of the
devil's advocate, because
one
that
of the
might actually show you that your idea has some gaps, and it's so valuable to know what those gaps are earlier rather than later when you're delivering something and it's just completely off.
right. One of the bravest moments for a product manager is when they realize, huh, that's not actually the right problem, or we're not solving this problem very well. We need to
Mhm.
stop and go back and try to figure out what we can do better. And that is a brave moment, right? There's often, like you said, confirmation bias, or then there's the myth of sunk costs. You just have to keep going, right? Well, we've invested this many months. We've got to keep going. And no, you should stop at the earliest moment where you recognize that you don't have product market fit, right? That's another aspect of during this phase, we emphasize, is your product viable? Is your product feasible? Is it valuable? You need to be testing all three of those things at this stage and making sure that, in fact, you can check all those boxes with confidence. And if you can, fantastic. If you can't, though, be the brave one and say, we need to do a little more here, right? And figure out what's right and what's wrong before we continue, right?
I want to acknowledge right now that the job of a product manager is very hard and there's psychology behind it, right? We know loss aversion. That is
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the most painful things to do, is to figure out what you thought is not true. But the job of a product manager, we say it at our company, it's one of our core values, is to be the truth teller, to be,
Mm-hmm.
you are saying, be the brave person, because
Right.
nobody in your company is going to be able to have all of the information that you do to make this kind of decision. So that is really your job, is validate the hypothesis, create the hypothesis based on your understanding of the market, and then validate it as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible, and bring that information to the organization.
In iterative fashion, right? One of our other consultants loves to talk about tiny acts of discovery.
Yeah.
And Dean talks about that all the time. Shout out to Dean. And I love that expression, tiny acts of discovery. And you just want to stack many of them together. And that's going to build your knowledge base so that when you build your business case, which is the kind of the summit of this phase, When you build the business case, you have done the work you could do to prove to yourself and the rest of the company that you've got a handle on this now. That's what you want to accomplish. Now, you will never be perfect. That's the other challenge of a product manager is don't overthink it. Don't get into this situation where you just want to keep testing forever. You have to get to a good 80, 85% degree of confidence, build that business case, get approval, and then move forward.
Thank you, Roger. So we're moving now into create.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have maybe you can talk to us about some of the stories of companies where they have had challenges in the create phase? What were most of the challenges that you have uncovered here?
Well, so at one of my clients, and this was a few years back, the struggle they had in create was that they were taking too much time, even with their initial estimates, right? They would try to build out a full product plan, and they were still in a waterfall style of development. So it was a slow and painful process. And getting the resources you needed allocated to be able to get everybody together and then run through this 10-week process was arduous. So when we helped them kind of identify that was an area for them to work on to get to faster prototyping, faster experimentation, even in the create phase, you should still be experimenting. You want to build narrow vertical slices of capability and then test that in front of customers, not spend 10 weeks building a plan, then execute. And they cut that time down by 60%. They were able to reduce a 10-week process to a 4-week process, which for them, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, was a huge step forward. And that got them to having small pieces of functionality or even services, because they were also a mixed business of not just software, but other things that were service-based. Could they get to even just a mock-up of that service and try it out much faster? So that was one example where in the create phase, they needed to be able to become more nimble, right? And I use that word because they hadn't yet gone to agile software development. I think they have now. So they've been moving forward in that journey. But even companies that are building physical things or services can become much more nimble by following some of the techniques that agile brings to them. And we want, as product managers, to partner with them and be nimble ourselves in the create phase so that we can help with the iteration of these experiments.
Thank you for sharing that. I remember this client, and certainly even in the create phase, it's also about create phase does not need to be your most expensive part of the product management cycle. It tends to be because you're including a lot more development resources, but you want to be very thoughtful about how those development resources are being used. And so everything that we just spoke about before about experimentation, it reduces the risk and it also reduces the cost of actually creating what you are working on. So,
One of the
yeah, go
things we
ahead.
do here is build, measure, learn, right?
Mhm.
So here you had tiny acts of discovery before. Now we're build, measure, learn, and building these vertical slices of capability and making sure that in fact they make sense. They work for the customer. And then we can iterate on that creation process and continue to refine this to become a better and better product over the time that we're building it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That create that. I think that's what I was trying to express is that it's not like create suddenly you have to create the whole thing. It's a
Right.
part of the process. All right,
Mm-hmm.
we're going into deliver. So this one is very challenging for a lot of product organizations. Personally, I've seen it with the product marketing organization being missing or not in lockstep with product management, and in general, just once there is something in create, not being aware of what product management is prioritizing at the time. So,
Mm-hmm.
talk to us about the deliver phase. What are we trying to seek here? What have you found in working with our clients?
So the deliver phase is an exciting phase, right? You hopefully, as you've been build, measure, learning in create, coming up with a iteratively better and better product. And now you want to show it to the world. I mentioned earlier, product marketing needs to be a part way back in the context phase, right? Of establishing your understanding of the market. Product marketing should be along for the entire journey. So during the create phase, you're actually working with product marketing on your positioning, on your key messages, on your proof points. You're conducting experiments that hopefully give you data. Then that data can become part of what you actually promote during the launch phase. So you've got to be thinking about this ahead of time working with product marketing to build all of those elements that I was just talking about, so that then when it comes time to launch, you've got a rich and robust set of those key messages and proof points. And you can then, and even maybe some early customers, you've got some partnerships, you've got some quotes, you've got actual usage information. And now it's time to pull that all together into an exciting story to tell. And that's another aspect of product management, storytelling, right? You've got to be a great storyteller, both when you're pitching your business case, as well as when you achieve this stage of let's tell the story of how customers are going to be delighted, excited, have their problem solved by our product when we get to the launch phase. It is an exciting time. It's also a time during our evaluation that we make sure that good stakeholder management practices are going on, good communication is going on, you're building a launch plan, you're creating measurements as well. Not only, launch is not just a day, it's going to become this ongoing effort. So even after the product's out in the marketplace, you need to continue to measure how effectively is that product being used? How effectively is it solving your customers' problems? So the measurement aspects are important to make sure you've got those nailed down, both while you were building the product and now that you're going to go out and actually have it in front of your customers. That way you can do what we call continuous discovery, right? So you get out there, you launch the product, you're excited, you think you're done, and you can go back to the beginning, right? Nope. You got to continue to live with your product and make sure your customers are living well with your product and do what we call continuous discovery. So experimentation continues. You follow their usage patterns. You look at their returns. You look at customer support inquiries. You look at all of this data to be able to understand, okay, we helped in 3 of the 5 places that we wanted to in this release, but we're still kind of missing on 2. We better boost up our ability to do that. So in some sense, you do go back to the beginning of like, okay, what is the next release going to do to help solve those 2 problems that I identified? But you've got to keep listening, keep working, staying in touch with your customers, still spending time with them, also using all the data you can get from if you're using software or if you're doing surveys, whatever it might be with your customers, building that and continuing to have that deep understanding so that you can continue to iterate and get that product even more exciting for your customers. So it feels like an end, but it's really just a beginning of the next thing, right? This delivery.
Yeah. Okay. So now we went through all of it. However, I wanted to kind of bring up the theme that I hope our listeners have heard, that product management, a good chunk of your job is learning, and it doesn't end at the delivery phase. It doesn't really start even at the discovery phase. There's continuous learning. And that is actually what makes our diagnostic so, so powerful. It's like a meta product because it enables us as a company also to learn. And that is why it's just so, so valuable for our clients, because we then become the experts in what's going on at the organization. And all of our learnings then feed into the rest of our content, our services of what we deliver for each client and for the market as well. So it really gives us a very unique vantage point in what's going on at product organizations. What are the common roadblocks to best practices? And it's such a powerful tool also for product leaders, because they now see, if I want to empower my product team, where are the sticking points? Which phase of product management is there an issue? And they can be so much more effective at addressing those process issues.
Absolutely.
So Roger, in your experience, and I suppose just thinking, if there is a product leader, what advice would you give to a product leader who is looking to make some changes about how product management is done at their organization? Where should they start?
I would suggest 2 things. One, as we've talked about, like you said, 10 out of 10, the roles and responsibilities of the product manager. How well written are those? How well do they actually reflect what's going on in a day-to-day life of a product manager? I would start with that one, because like you said, we almost always see that as one of our problems. We also have just sort of a mini self-assessment. It's like a list of just, I think it's only 20 questions that a product leader can contact us and ask us for this quick self-exam. And that will help them get a sense of, where do I think I need some help? And would it be valuable for me to engage more deeply with us at Productside to help conduct this more intense optimization, right? The other thing I want to emphasize is, after we've conducted the diagnostic report, we will then partner with you on the journey of improvement through our
Mhm.
training, through our services, and we will do that in the way that makes the most sense for you. In some of our clients, it's rounds and rounds of training followed by process improvements. In other clients, it's just attending their meetings and giving them feedback and helping them on the journey of improvement. So the diagnostic report is going to give them the good map of what to do, but then we will be a partner on that journey afterwards to help them continue to improve. But back to your original point, yeah, as a product leader, check out your roles and responsibilities, see how well that's actually matching what's going on every day, and try out this self-assessment, and then contact us for more help.
I'm going to add to that, Roger. So I completely agree with you. Roles and responsibilities, 10 out of 10, we see it. Based on our discussion today, I would also think about how are we a learning organization? I would be curious about how do you currently experiment? Is there more to do it with validation practices at your organization? And also, are you driving outcomes for the business? That's the other
Yes.
most common issue that we find is just misalignment, not just with the product manager role of what they're doing every day with their job description, but the misalignment of product management as an organization with what the business actually is trying to accomplish. So, those are additional ways to start. And of course, our free self assessment is also
Mhm.
a great way for you to take a look at yourself at what some of those problems and challenges you might be facing. So,
Right.
Roger, thank you for this amazing discussion on. I think we covered so much of the blueprint, product management process,
Mhm.
product management practices, and of course, our diagnostic report. How do you want people to continue to follow you after this discussion?
Well, check out our great resources on productside.com, but then you can connect with me as well on LinkedIn. I am one Roger Snyder, all one word. So feel free to connect with me, and you'll see a lot of the great content and blogs and additional learning. To your point about being an ongoing learning organization and being a lifetime learner, we provide a lot of these resources on an ongoing basis in terms of blogs and webinars and podcasts. So check us out at productside.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. One Roger Snyder.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Roger. And you heard it, everyone. Another fantastic episode of Product Side Stories. Join us next week for our next episode. Bye, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Product Side Stories. I hope today's insights inspire you and propel your product journey forward. Remember, every challenge is a lesson waiting to be learned. And you can also visit us at productside.com for more free resources like webinars, templates, playbooks, and other product wisdom repackaged for you. I'm Rina Alexin, and until next time, keep innovating, keep leading, and keep creating stories worth sharing.